James Carter stared at the electrical panel in the Hendersons' basement, his calloused hands working methodically through the tangle of copper wiring. At 41, he'd rewired half the houses in Millbrook Township, each job a small victory of precision over chaos. But today, his mind wandered to the chaos brewing in his own home 3 miles away. The screwdriver slipped, nicking his knuckle. A thin red line appeared, and he cursed under his breath. 15 years of marriage, and he'd never felt this unsettled. Lily had been distant for months now, coming home late from her bookkeeping job, claiming overtime that didn't show up on her pay stubs. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages she deleted before reading. James finished the connection and flipped the breaker. Light flooded the basement. Another job done, another family's problem solved. If only his own life were so simple. "All set, Mrs. Patterson?" he called upstairs. The elderly woman appeared at the top of the steps, checkbook in hand. "You're a godsend, James. That outlet's been sparking for weeks." She handed him the payment. "How's that boy of yours? Still playing Little League?" "Tommy's doing great. 10 years old and already throwing fastballs I can barely catch." James pocketed the check and gathered his tools. "Tell Mr. Patterson I said hello." The drive home took 12 minutes through suburban streets lined with modest 2-story houses and manicured lawns. James had bought their house on Maple Street when Tommy was born, a fixer-upper that he'd slowly transformed into something worthy of his family. Fresh paint, new windows, a deck he'd built with his own hands. Every nail hammered with love and hope for the future. That future felt increasingly fragile. James pulled into the driveway at 4:47 p.m. Lily's Honda wasn't there yet, though her shift at Morrison & Associates supposedly ended at 4:30. He found Tommy in the living room, sprawled on the carpet with homework scattered around him. "Hey, champ, how was school?" Tommy looked up, his dark hair falling across his forehead in that same stubborn cowlick James remembered from his own childhood photos. "It was okay. Mom said she'd help with my math, but she's not home yet." "I'll take a look." James dropped his tool bag by the door and settled beside his son. Third-grade multiplication tables, nothing too challenging. They worked through the problems together, Tommy's pencil scratching across the worksheet. "Dad?" Tommy's voice carried a hesitant note. "Yeah? You know that guy who moved into the Kowalskis' old house? The blue one down the street?" James paused. The Kowalskis had moved to Florida 2 months ago, and he'd seen moving trucks at the house recently. "What about him?" "He talks to Mom sometimes when you're at work." Tommy's eyes stayed fixed on his homework. "He gave me this." The boy reached into his backpack and pulled out a tactical flashlight, military grade, worth at least $60. James took it, feeling the solid weight in his palm. Not the kind of gift a stranger gives to a kid. "Did Mom see him give you this?" Tommy nodded slowly. "She said it was okay, that he was just being nice." A pause. "But I don't like him, Dad. He asks too many questions." A cold knot formed in James's stomach. "What kind of questions?" "About when you come home, about where we go on weekends, about—" Tommy's voice dropped to a whisper. "About Mom." The front door opened before James could respond. Lily walked in, her auburn hair slightly disheveled, her smile forced. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder on Route 9. She kissed Tommy's forehead, then James's cheek. Her lips felt cold. "How was your day?" James asked, studying her face. "Busy. End-of-month reports. You know how it is." She moved toward the kitchen. "I'll start dinner." James followed her, leaving Tommy with his homework. In the kitchen, Lily busied herself pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, avoiding his eyes. "Tom showed me a flashlight someone gave him." Lily's hand paused on a package of ground beef. "Oh, that. One of the clients at work. His son outgrew it. I thought Tommy might like it for camping." "Which client?" "Mr. Randall." "He does contracting work." She turned to face him, her green eyes steady. "Is there a problem?" James wanted to push further, but something in her expression warned him off. Instead, he nodded and retreated to his workshop in the garage. Tools didn't lie. Electrical circuits followed predictable patterns, unlike people. He spent the next hour organizing his equipment, but his mind kept circling back to Tommy's words. He asks too many questions. James had installed security systems for enough worried homeowners to recognize the signs. Someone was gathering intelligence on his family. The question was why. 3 days later, the doorbell rang at 6:15 p.m. James opened the front door to find a man in his mid-30s, tall and lean with the kind of confident smile that sales professionals cultivated. He held a bottle of wine and wore khakis that probably cost more than James made in a week. Evening. I'm Alex Randall. Just moved into the blue house down the street. Thought I'd introduce myself to the neighbors. James accepted the man's firm handshake, studying his face. Strong jaw, expensive haircut, eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the entryway behind James. James Carter, welcome to the neighborhood. Beautiful street, very family-friendly. Alex's gaze shifted past James toward the living room where Tommy's toys were scattered. I see you have a son. Great kid. We've chatted a few times. The knot in James's stomach tightened. Have you? Just neighborly conversation. He mentioned his mom works in accounting. Small world. I do some bookkeeping myself. Alex's smile never wavered. Maybe our wives have crossed paths. From the kitchen came the sound of breaking glass. James turned to see Lily standing in the doorway, her face white as paper, fragments of a coffee mug at her feet. Lily, this is Alex Randall, our new neighbor. Alex stepped forward, extending his hand. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Carter. James tells me you work in accounting. Maybe we know some of the same people. Lily didn't take his hand. She stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked back to the kitchen without a word. Sorry, James said, though he wasn't sure why he was apologizing. She's had a long day. Of course. Well, I should let you get back to your evening. Alex handed him the wine bottle. Maybe we can grab a beer sometime. Talk shop. What kind of shop would that be? Alex's smile sharpened slightly. Family business, the kind that keeps you up at night. After the door closed, James stood in the hallway holding the wine bottle. From the kitchen came the sound of Lily sweeping up glass, each scrape of the dustpan like fingernails on a chalkboard. He found her kneeling by the sink, hands shaking as she gathered the fragments. Everything okay? I'm fine, just clumsy. She wouldn't look at him. You know him. It wasn't a question. Lily's hands stilled for a moment before resuming their work. No, He startled me. James knelt beside her, gently taking the dustpan. Lily, talk to me. She finally met his eyes, and what he saw there made his chest tighten. Fear. Raw, desperate fear. I can't, she whispered. Not yet. Can't what? I can't lose you. Either of you. She stood abruptly, dumping the glass into the trash. I need to check on Tommy. She left him kneeling on the kitchen floor, holding fragments that cut his fingers when he gripped them too tightly. That night, James lay awake listening to Lily's breathing. She'd taken a sleeping pill, something she'd never done in their 15 years together. Her phone sat on the nightstand, dark and silent. But he'd seen her delete 3 text messages before bed. At 2:17 a.m., he slipped out of bed and padded to Tommy's room. His son slept peacefully, one arm hanging off the mattress. James adjusted the blanket and was turning to leave when something caught his eye. The window screen had been removed. James checked the lock. Secure, but the screen lay propped against the wall. He replaced it carefully, noting the fresh scratches on the frame. Someone had taken it off from the outside. Back in his bedroom, James pulled on clothes and grabbed a flashlight. He needed to check the perimeter. The night air carried the scent of late spring, lilacs and fresh-cut grass. James circled the house methodically, looking for footprints, disturbed mulch, anything out of place. Behind Tommy's window, he found them. Boot prints in the soft earth of Lily's flower bed, size 11 or 12 with a distinctive tread pattern. Someone had been watching his son sleep. James photographed the prints with his phone, then sat on the back steps and tried to make sense of the pieces. A stranger moves in 3 doors down, gives expensive gifts to Tommy, asks probing questions, shows up at the front door like a long-lost friend. And now someone, presumably the same someone, is prowling around the house at night. His phone buzzed with an incoming text. Unknown number. She never told you about me, did she? James stared at the screen, his hands steady despite the rage building in his chest. Another message followed. Ask her about Portland. Ask her about the promises she made. A third message. Your son has her eyes. Beautiful boy. Shame to see him hurt by the truth. James deleted the messages and went back inside. In the kitchen, he pulled out a notebook and started making a list. Names, dates, details. Everything he could remember about Lily's behavior over the past few months. Every late night, every suspicious phone call, every lie disguised as explanation. When he finished, the notebook contained 3 pages of evidence that his marriage was over. But that wasn't what worried him most. The threat to Tommy changed everything. The next morning, James drove to Millbrook Electronics and bought a basic security system. 4 wireless cameras, motion sensors, and a digital recorder. Nothing fancy, but enough to monitor the house when he wasn't there. He installed the cameras while Lily was at work and Tommy was at school. One covering the front door, one watching the backyard, one focused on Tommy's window, and one hidden in the living room. The feeds would record to his laptop, accessible from his phone. At 3:45 p.m., he picked up Tommy from school and took him for ice cream. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Shoot." Tommy stirred his chocolate sundae, gathering courage. "That guy, mister, Randall, he knows things about us." "What kind of things?" "He knew Mom's middle name, and he knew about my scar." Tommy touched the small mark on his chin from a bicycle accident 2 years earlier. "How would he know that unless what? Unless Mom told him?" Tommy looked up with eyes too old for his 10-year-old face. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit James like a punch to the gut. "Why would you ask that?" "Because she cries sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking, and you don't smile anymore." Tommy's voice was matter-of-fact, the way kids delivered devastating truths. "And because, mister, Randall said things might change soon." "He said that to you?" Tommy nodded. "Yesterday, when I was riding my bike, he was getting his mail and he stopped me. Said change was hard, but sometimes necessary. Said I was lucky to have such a pretty mom." James felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. "What else did he say?" "That he used to know Mom, before she met you, and that maybe they'd know each other again." James paid the check and drove home in silence, his mind racing. Alex Randall wasn't just a random threat, he was part of Lily's past, someone who felt entitled to reclaim what he believed belonged to him. That evening, James waited until Tommy was asleep before confronting Lily. She sat at the kitchen table grading her bookkeeping files, her red pen moving across columns of numbers. "We need to talk." She looked up, resignation flickering across her face. "About what?" "About Alex Randall, about Portland, about the promises you made." The pen slipped from her fingers, leaving a red slash across the page. "How do you—" "He's been texting me. He's been talking to Tommy. Last night, someone removed the screen from Tom's window and stood outside watching him sleep." James sat across from her, keeping his voice level. "So let's skip the part where you pretend not to know what I'm talking about." Lily buried her face in her hands. For a long moment, the only sound was the kitchen clock ticking away seconds of their marriage. "It was 3 years ago," she said finally. "A conference in Portland. I was there for work and he was—" She looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I made a mistake, James. A terrible mistake. An affair. 3 days. That's all it was. 3 days of stupidity that I regretted the moment I came home." She reached across the table, but James pulled his hands away. "I ended it immediately. Changed my phone number, requested different clients, made sure I'd never see him again." "But you did see him again?" "No, not until he moved here. I swear to you, James, I had no idea he was coming." Her voice broke. "He just appeared one day like a nightmare walking back into my life." "What promises?" Lily's face crumpled. "He said he loved me. Said he'd wait as long as it took. I told him it was over, that I loved you and Tommy, but he wouldn't listen. He kept calling, sending flowers to my office, showing up at the grocery store. That's why I changed jobs. I couldn't handle the pressure." "When was this?" 6 months ago. I thought I'd escaped him, but then he bought the Kowalski's house and I knew—" She shuddered. "I knew he'd never let me go." James absorbed this, fitting the pieces together. "What does he want?" "Me. Us. He has this fantasy that we're meant to be together, that you and Tommy are just obstacles to overcome." Lily's voice hardened. "He said if I didn't come back to him willingly, he'd find a way to destroy our family. Make you hate me so much that you'd leave, and then he could step in as Tommy's father figure. Is that why you've been distant? Why you've been lying about working late?" "I've been meeting with lawyers, trying to get a restraining order. But he's careful, never technically threatens anything, never does anything illegal, just lurks, watches, waits." She stood and paced to the window. "He's out there somewhere right now. He told me he has ways of monitoring the house." James felt the last pieces click into place. The gifts to Tommy, the questions about our schedule. He's been gathering intelligence. He knows everything, James. What time you leave for work. What time Tommy gets home from school. Where I shop for groceries. He's been studying us like a science project. What else haven't you told me? Lily turned from the window, her face pale in the kitchen light. He has photos of me, of Tommy, of you. He showed me some of them, taken with a telephoto lens from his house. He said if I try to involve the police, he'll claim I invited him to move here, that we're having an affair. He has text messages I sent him. What kind of messages? Asking him to leave us alone? Begging him to stay away from Tommy? He's twisted them to look like love letters, taken them out of context. She slumped against the counter. He's thought of everything, James, every angle, every contingency. James studied his wife's face, searching for tells. Her story made sense of the fear he'd seen, the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety. But something nagged at him. Show me the texts. What? The messages he sent me. Show me yours. Lily hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her messages, then handed it to him. James read through the conversation history. Dozens of messages from Alex, escalating from friendly to insistent to threatening. Lily's responses were consistently dismissive, begging him to leave her family alone. But there were gaps. Messages had been deleted. What did you delete? Nothing important, just... She trailed off, reading his expression. You don't believe me? I believe you're scared. I believe he's dangerous. But I think there's more to this story. Before Lily could respond, James's phone buzzed with a motion alert from the security system. He opened the app and saw a figure moving across the front yard. Alex Randall, walking slowly past their house, staring at the lit windows. He's outside! Lily rushed to the window, then immediately stepped back. Don't let him see you watching. James saved the video file and closed the app. Pack a bag. You and Tommy are staying at your sister's tonight. He'll just follow us there. Then we'll figure out somewhere else. But you're not sleeping in this house while he's prowling around outside. Lily started to protest, but something in James's voice stopped her. She went upstairs to pack while James checked the locks and armed the security system. As they loaded bags into the car, Alex appeared on his front porch, coffee mug in hand, watching them with that same confident smile. James started the engine and backed out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, he saw Alex raise his mug in a mocking salute. The war had begun. James dropped his family at Lily's sister's house in Riverside, 20 minutes away. Sarah lived alone in a condo complex with good security and nosy neighbors, safer than their exposed house on Maple Street. How long do we have to stay here? Tommy asked as they carried bags to the door. Until we figure things out, James said. Think of it as an adventure. Tommy wasn't buying it, but he was too smart to argue. Sarah welcomed them with questions James couldn't answer yet, promises to keep them safe that he hoped she could keep. On the drive home, James called Mike Reeves, a former client who worked for the Millbrook Police Department. James, good to hear from you. How's that rewiring job at the station holding up? Running like a dream. Listen, Mike, I need a favor. Personal matter. What kind of personal matter? Background check on a neighbor, guy named Alex Randall, just moved to 247 Maple Street. Mike's tone shifted. What kind of trouble are we talking about? The kind where my 10-year-old son doesn't feel safe in his own backyard. I'll see what I can dig up. Give me 24 hours. James hung up and continued the drive home through empty suburban streets. At every red light, he checked his mirrors for headlights that might be following too closely. The house felt different with his family gone. Larger, colder, more vulnerable. James activated the security system and settled at his kitchen table with a legal pad and pen. Time to get organized. He started with a timeline. Every interaction with Alex, every strange behavior from Lily, every detail Tommy had mentioned. 3 pages of notes later, a pattern emerged. Alex had been planning this for months, possibly longer. The house purchase, the careful introduction, the psychological pressure on Lily, all orchestrated to isolate her from support and force her back into his life. But he'd made one critical error, threatening Tommy. James had installed electrical systems for enough worried homeowners to know how obsessive men operated. They were hunters who relied on fear, isolation, and the sufferer's reluctance to seek help. Take away those advantages, and they became just another criminal making stupid choices. At 11:47 p.m., his phone buzzed with a motion alert. James opened the security app to see Alex standing at the end of his driveway, cell phone pressed to his ear. The audio was too distant to make out words, but the body language was clear, animated, aggressive, frustrated. James recorded the encounter and made a note in his log. Late night surveillance, possible communication with unknown third party. Alex finished his call and walked slowly back to his house, but not before stopping to stare directly at the camera mounted under James's eaves. He smiled and waved, as if greeting an old friend. James saved the video and added another note. Subject aware of surveillance, continues provocative behavior. The next afternoon, Mike Reeves called back with troubling news. Your neighbor's got an interesting history. Real name is Alexander Martin Randall, 34 years old, currently unemployed, but living off a disability settlement from a construction accident 3 years ago. What kind of disability? Psychological trauma, according to the paperwork. But here's the thing. He's had 4 different addresses in the past 2 years, and I found police reports at 3 of them. Pressure complaints, all involving women he claimed to be in relationships with. James felt his jaw tighten. What happened to the complaints? 2 were dropped when the women moved away. The 3rd resulted in a restraining order that expired last year. Mike paused. James, this guy's a professional obsessive man. He finds vulnerable women, inserts himself into their lives, then makes it so uncomfortable that they either give in or disappear. What about criminal charges? That's the problem. He's smart enough to stay just below the legal threshold. Never physically attacks anyone, never makes explicit threats, never breaks into properties. Just applies steady psychological pressure until his targets break. Any violence in his background? 1 arrest for disorderly conduct in Albany, charges dropped. But here's what worries me. The construction accident that got him the disability settlement. The foreman claims Randall caused it deliberately, trying to hurt a coworker who was dating his ex-girlfriend. Nothing proved, but the pattern fits. James absorbed this information. What would you do? Officially, keep documenting everything, avoid confrontation, and hope he loses interest. Mike's voice dropped. Unofficially, this guy's escalating. The fact that he bought a house near you suggests he's more committed than his previous targets. I'd get your family somewhere safe and start thinking about permanent solutions. Meaning? Meaning guys like this don't usually stop until someone makes them stop. After the call, James sat in his truck outside Tommy's school, watching kids stream toward waiting parents. His son appeared in the crowd, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking smaller and more vulnerable than James remembered. How was your day, champ? Okay, I guess. Tommy climbed into the passenger seat. Mrs. Davidson asked where Mom was. I didn't know what to say. You can tell her Mom's visiting Aunt Sarah for a few days. Are we going back there tonight? James nodded, hating the disappointment in his son's voice. Just until things settle down. They drove toward Riverside in silence, but Tommy's questions hung in the air like smoke. How long would this last? When would they feel safe again? What was happening to their family? James didn't have answers, but he was beginning to formulate a plan. That evening, while Tommy played video games with his cousin and Lily helped Sarah with dinner, James sat on the condo balcony and made a series of phone calls. First, to a lawyer specializing in family protection orders. The attorney was pessimistic. Without explicit threats or physical violence, temporary restraining orders were difficult to obtain and easy to violate. Second, to a private investigator recommended by Mike Reeves. The PI was more encouraging, willing to dig deeper into Alex's background and document his activities for a substantial fee. Third, to his insurance agent, confirming that his homeowner's policy covered security upgrades and temporary housing if needed. By the time he finished, James had committed to spending nearly $5,000 on professional help, money they couldn't afford, but couldn't afford not to spend. Lily found him on the balcony, staring out at the parking lot below. Any luck? Maybe. We'll see. He turned to face her. How are you holding up? Better, now that we're away from the house. Tommy seems more relaxed, too. She sat in the plastic chair beside him. I'm sorry, James, for all of this, for bringing him into our lives. You didn't bring him anywhere. He followed you. But if you hadn't what? Made a mistake 3 years ago? Everyone makes mistakes. James reached over and took her hand. The mistake was 3 years ago. The threat is right now, and we're going to deal with it. But even as he said it, something inside him stayed cold. They could fight the threat together, yes. But after the smoke cleared, what would be left? Trust wasn't something you rebuilt with apologies, especially not when a child had been put at risk. Lily leaned against him, and for a moment they sat quietly, watching cars navigate the parking lot below. Normal people living normal lives, free from the psychological warfare that had consumed their family. What if he doesn't stop? James had been wondering the same thing. Then we make him stop. What does that mean? I don't know yet, but I'm done being a sufferer. 3 days later, the private investigator called with preliminary findings. Alex Randall had a pattern that extended back nearly a decade, a series of obsessive relationships with married women, each ending in pressure campaigns that drove his targets away from their communities. Here's what's interesting, the PI explained over a secure phone connection. He doesn't just pick random women. They all fit a profile, married with young children, financially dependent on their husbands, living in small communities where gossip travels fast. Meaning? Meaning he specifically targets women who have the most to lose from exposure. Makes them easier to control. The PI paused. Your wife isn't his first bookkeeper either. He seems to prefer women with access to financial information. You think this is about money? Partially, but mostly it's about power, control, the thrill of destroying something stable and claiming it for himself. James processed this while watching the street outside Sarah's condo. What happened to the others? 2 moved across the country with their families. 1 got divorced. Her husband blamed her for bringing the fixated hunter into their lives. The 4th, the PI's voice grew somber. The 4th had a nervous breakdown. She's in a psychiatric facility in Vermont. Husband got full custody of their kids. And Randall moved on to the next target. Until now, this is the first time he's put down permanent roots. Bought a house, established residency, really committed to the long game. James felt cold fingers trace his spine. Why is this time different? That's what worries me. Either your wife means more to him than the others, or he's escalating his behavior. Either way, you're looking at a much more dangerous situation. James listened, but his thoughts had already drifted. Other families had broken apart under this kind of pressure. Other husbands had walked away alone. He realized with sudden clarity he didn't want that to happen to Tommy. But for himself and Lily, the damage was already done. That night, James lay awake in Sarah's guest room, listening to Tommy breathe in the rollaway bed beside him. Lily slept on the couch in the living room, unwilling to share a bed until their life returned to normal. If it ever returned to normal. James had been thinking about Mike Reeves's unofficial advice. Guys like this don't usually stop until someone makes them stop. The legal system was designed to react to crimes after they happened, not prevent them beforehand. By the time Alex crossed the line into actionable territory, it might be too late. But there were other options, less official solutions. James had grown up in a rougher neighborhood than Millbrook Township, where problems sometimes required direct resolution. He'd left that world behind when he married Lily, choosing stability over street justice. But the skills remained, buried under 15 years of suburban respectability. Maybe it was time to remember who he used to be. The next morning, James called in sick and drove to a neighborhood he hadn't visited in 2 decades. The streets were narrower here, the houses closer together, the residents harder around the edges. He found Bobby Torino outside a corner deli, unchanged except for gray threading through his black hair. Bobby had been James's best friend in high school, before college, before Lily, before the decision to leave the old neighborhood behind. Jimmy Carter, son of a witch. Bobby embraced him with genuine warmth. What brings you to the old stomping grounds? I need advice about a problem that won't go away. Bobby studied his face, reading subtext. The kind of problem that keeps a man awake at night? Yeah? Let's walk. They strolled through streets that held 20 years of shared memories. The basketball court where they'd learned to fight. The parking lot where they'd learned to drive. The alley where Jimmy had learned that sometimes violence was the only language bullies understood. Tell me about your problem. James explained the situation, watching Bobby's expression grow darker with each detail. When he finished, Bobby stopped walking and turned to face him. This guy's playing the long game. Professional-level psychological warfare. Bobby's voice carried the edge James remembered from their teenage years. Question is, what are you willing to do about it? Whatever it takes to protect my family? Even if it means stepping outside the law? James thought about Tommy asking if they were getting divorced, about Lily crying when she thought no one was watching, about Alex standing in their yard at midnight. Yeah, Bobby nodded slowly. I know some people, specialists in making problems disappear. But Jimmy, once you go down that road, there's no coming back. You sure you want to cross that line? What's the alternative? Keep playing by rules he's not following. Hope the system eventually catches up. Watch your family get destroyed piece by piece while you fill out police reports. James had already reached the same conclusion. What kind of specialists? The kind who understand that some people forfeit their right to peaceful solutions. The kind who make house calls in the middle of the night. Bobby pulled out a business card with nothing but a phone number. You call this number, ask for Vincent. Tell him Bobby sent you and that you have a pest control problem. How much? Depends what kind of pest control you need. Could be as simple as a conversation, could be more permanent. James pocketed the card. Bobby, I appreciate this, but I can't have anything traced back to my family. These guys are ghosts, Jimmy. They don't leave traces. Bobby's smile held no warmth. But here's the thing. Once you make that call, your problem becomes their problem, and their solutions tend to be final. James left the old neighborhood with more than a business card. He'd left with a reminder of who he used to be, and the knowledge that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to do things you'll never talk about afterward. But first, he wanted to try a different approach. That afternoon, James returned to his house for the first time in 4 days. The security system showed multiple instances of Alex prowling the property, always staying just within legal boundaries. No broken windows, no forced entry, nothing actionable. But the psychological message was clear. I can get to you anytime I want. James downloaded the surveillance footage and burned it to a DVD, building his documentation file. Then he did something that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. He walked 3 doors down and knocked on Alex's front door. Alex answered immediately as if he'd been watching from the window. His smile was razor sharp. James, what a pleasant surprise. We need to talk. Of course, come in. Alex's house was spartanly furnished but meticulously organized. Military precision in every detail, from the perfectly aligned magazines on the coffee table to the tactical equipment displayed on wall-mounted racks. You were in the service, James observed. Marines. 2 tours in Afghanistan before the construction accident ended my career. Alex gestured toward the couch. Have a seat. Beer? I'm good. James remained standing, studying the room. Maps of the local area covered one wall, with red pins marking various locations. He recognized his house, Tommy's school, Lily's office. Impressive setup. I like to stay organized, know my surroundings. Alex followed his gaze. Information is power, don't you think? Depends what you do with it. True. Alex moved to a desk and picked up a manila folder. For instance, I have information about you that might surprise you. Did you know your wife has been meeting with divorce lawyers? James kept his expression neutral. Is that so? 3 different firms in the past 2 months? Asking about custody arrangements, asset division, spousal support? Alex opened the folder and pulled out photographs, telephoto shots of Lily entering law offices. She's planning to leave you, James. The only question is when, and you want to be there when she does. I want to save her from making another mistake, like marrying you in the first place. Alex's mask slipped slightly, revealing the hunter underneath. She was happy with me, alive in a way she hasn't been since. You represent security, stability, boredom. I represent passion. You represent control and intimidation. I represent persistence, dedication, the willingness to fight for what I love. Alex stepped closer. You gave up the first time she seemed distant. I never give up. James recognized the conversational trap and stepped around it. What do you want? Simple. I want you to make this easy for everyone. File for divorce, ask for minimal custody, let Lily and Tommy start fresh. Alex's voice carried the reasonable tone of a businessman negotiating a contract. In exchange, I'll disappear from your life. No more surveillance, no more late-night visits. Clean break. And if I refuse, then things get complicated. I have enough documentation of Lily's extramarital activities to destroy her reputation in this community. Photos, text messages, hotel receipts. Alex returned to the folder and pulled out more evidence. I also have information about your tax situation that might interest the IRS. Amazing how much you can learn about someone when you put your mind to it. James studied the photographs, clearly doctored images that made innocent meetings look incriminating. Professional quality work that would convince a divorce court or destroy a woman's standing in a small town. How long have you been planning this? Since the day she left me in Portland. Some losses you don't accept. Alex's eyes held the flat shine of obsession. I've invested too much time and money to walk away empty-handed. And Tommy? Tommy will adjust. Kids are resilient. Alex's smile returned. Besides, he'll have a new father who actually pays attention to him, someone who teaches him useful skills. The casual dismissal of his son's well-being triggered something cold and violent in James's chest. For a moment, he saw himself wrapping his hands around Alex's throat, squeezing until the smug smile disappeared forever. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. I'll need time to think about this. Of course, but don't take too long. I'm not a patient man. Alex walked him to the door. Oh, and James? Your security cameras are visible from the street. Might want to consider better placement. James left the house with a clear understanding of what he was dealing with. Alex wasn't just a serial manipulator. He was a professional hunter with military training, unlimited time, and no moral boundaries. Reasoning with him was pointless. The legal system was inadequate, which left only one option. That evening, James sat in his truck outside Sarah's condo and dialed the number Bobby had given him. Vincent speaking. Bobby Torino said, you might be able to help with a pest control problem. What kind of pest? The kind that threatens children. A pause. I'll need details. Meet me tomorrow at Rossetti's Diner on Route 22, 10 a.m. Come alone. The line went dead. James stared at his phone, knowing he'd just crossed a line he could never uncross. Tomorrow he would sit across from a stranger and discuss the removal of another human being as if planning a home renovation. But when he thought about Alex's casual dismissal of Tommy's well-being, the choice felt inevitable. Some problems required permanent solutions. Vincent turned out to be a soft-spoken man in his 50s, gray-haired and unremarkable, except for eyes that seemed to catalog everything without judgment. They sat in a corner booth at Rossetti's, nursing coffee while James explained the situation. Military training complicates things, Vincent said when James finished. Makes him more dangerous, but also more predictable. Marines think tactically, but sometimes forget strategy. What's the difference? Tactics win battles. Strategy wins wars. Vincent pulled out a tablet and made notes. Your problem is thinking this is about your wife. It's not. It's about dominance. This man needs to feel superior, in control, unbeatable. Take that away, and he becomes just another angry person with poor impulse control. How do we take it away? Several options. We could arrange for him to have an accident. Permanent solution, minimal risk to you. Vincent's voice carried no more emotion than if he were discussing weather. Cost would be $25,000 plus expenses. James felt his stomach drop. That's more than I make in 6 months. Alternative approaches cost less but carry more risk. We could arrange for him to be arrested on serious charges, planted evidence, anonymous tips, that sort of thing. $15,000, but no guarantee he stays locked up. What else? Psychological warfare. Turn his own tactics against him. Make him feel hunted instead of the hunter. $5,000, but it requires your participation and might take months to show results. James considered the options. The first was final but financially impossible. The second was risky and temporary. The third was affordable but uncertain. Tell me about the psychological approach. Vincent leaned forward. We make him paranoid. Phone calls in the middle of the night from untraceable numbers. Strange noises around his house. Evidence that someone's been inside when he's away. Dead animals on his doorstep. Escalating pressure until he cracks or leaves. Legal risks? Minimal if done correctly. Vincent's smile was thin and cold. The beauty is that guys like him have enemies. Lots of people with reasons to make their lives difficult. We become just another shadow in a world full of shadows. What do you need from me? $5,000 cash, half up front, details about his routine, his property, his vulnerabilities, and most importantly, an ironclad alibi for everything we do. James thought about Lily crying in the kitchen, about Tommy asking if they were getting divorced, about Alex's casual threats. $5,000 was most of their savings, but some investments were worth the cost. When do we start? Tonight. Go home, act normal, make sure you're visible to multiple witnesses. Leave the rest to us. They shook hands in the parking lot, sealing an agreement that would either save James's family or destroy what remained of his soul. But as he drove back to Sarah's condo, James felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. That night, James took his family to dinner at a crowded restaurant. made sure the waitress remembered them, paid with a credit card that would timestamp their location. At 8:30, they returned to Sarah's condo for a movie night with her and the kids. At 10:15, James's phone buzzed with a motion alert from his security system. He opened the app to see Alex standing in his driveway, but something was different. The man looked agitated, constantly checking over his shoulder, talking rapidly into his phone. "What's wrong?" Lily asked, noticing his expression. "Nothing. Just checking the house." James closed the app without mentioning what he'd seen, but over the next hour, his phone continued buzzing with alerts. Alex appeared repeatedly on camera, circling the house, checking windows, testing doors. His body language spoke of confusion and growing paranoia. Vincent's crew was already at work. At 11:47, the alert stopped. Alex presumably returned to his own house, but the damage was done. For the first time since moving to Maple Street, he'd felt like the hunted instead of the hunter. James should have felt triumph. Instead, he felt tired. This wasn't a victory, it was a reprieve. And in that quiet, something settled inside him. Even if Alex vanished from their lives forever, the shadows he'd exposed would remain. Some betrayals couldn't be undone. Some cracks couldn't be sealed. James allowed himself a small smile as he tucked Tommy into the rollaway bed. "Dad?" "Yeah, champ. When can we go home?" "Soon," James said, and for the first time in weeks, he meant it. The psychological campaign escalated over the next several days. James heard about it secondhand from neighbors who called to report strange activities on Maple Street. "Someone's been messing with that new fellow's trash cans, Mrs. Patterson reported, setting them up in patterns like some kind of ritual. Kids spray-painted symbols on his mailbox," another neighbor mentioned. "Weird stuff, looked almost military." "Saw him outside at 3 in the morning with a flashlight," reported Mr. Kowalski, visiting from Florida. "Seemed like he was looking for something in his yard." James made sympathetic noises while documenting each incident. Vincent's crew was methodical, professional, and completely invisible. The pressure seemed random, disconnected, impossible to trace. On the fourth day, Alex made a mistake. He showed up at Tommy's school. The principal called James immediately. "Mr. Carter, there's been an incident. A man claiming to be Tommy's stepfather tried to check him out of school early." His heartbeat paused, just for a second. "What man?" "He gave his name as Alex Randall, said there was a family emergency, and that you'd sent him to pick up Tommy." The principal's voice carried professional concern. "Of course, we don't release children to anyone not on the authorized pickup list, but I thought you should know. Where's Tommy now?" "Safe in my office. I've called the police to file a report." James reached the school in 8 minutes, running 3 red lights and taking corners at dangerous speeds. He found Tommy in the principal's office, pale but unharmed, with a police officer taking notes. "Dad." Tommy ran to him, and James wrapped his son in a fierce hug. "You okay, champ?" "I'm fine, but Mr. Randall seemed really angry when they wouldn't let me go with him." Tommy looked up with worried eyes. "He said you were hurt and needed me to come home right away." The police officer introduced himself as Detective Morrison and asked for details about Alex's behavior. James provided background information while carefully omitting his own extracurricular activities. "This constitutes attempted abduction," Detective Morrison explained. "Combined with the pressure complaints you've filed, we have enough to arrest Mr. Randall and request a protective order." "How long will that take?" "I can have a warrant within 2 hours. We'll pick him up this afternoon." James felt a mixture of relief and concern. Official police involvement would protect his family, but it might also interfere with Vincent's operation. As they left the school, James called Vincent from his truck. "We have a problem. The target just tried to abduct my son. Police are issuing an arrest warrant." "Actually, that's good news," Vincent replied calmly. "Means he's cracking faster than expected. Don't worry about the arrest. We'll adapt." "How?" "Trust the process. By the time he posts bail, he'll be in no condition to threaten anyone." James didn't ask for details. Some things were better left unknown. Alex was arrested at 3:47 p.m., taken into custody without incident while attempting to retrieve something from his backyard. The something turned out to be a dead raccoon that had been nailed to his back fence, another of Vincent's calling cards. James watched from his truck as police led Alex away in handcuffs. The man looked haggard, paranoid, constantly checking the sky as if expecting aerial surveillance. 5 days of psychological pressure had transformed a confident hunter into a confused, frightened animal. But James knew the arrest was temporary. Alex would post bail within hours and return more dangerous than before. Vincent called that evening with an update. Phase 2 begins tonight. We're escalating to property damage and digital interference. By tomorrow morning, your problem will either surrender or require more permanent intervention. What kind of property damage? The kind that makes a man question his sanity. Windows that crack for no reason, fuses that blow repeatedly, water pressure that fails at random intervals, passing by 1,000 small failures, and digital interference, phone calls at all hours from different numbers, text messages from accounts that don't exist, emails with attachments he didn't request. Vincent paused. The goal is to make him feel that reality itself is turning against him. How long can you maintain this? As long as necessary. But most people break within a week of intensive pressure. The human mind isn't designed to handle sustained uncertainty. James hung up and returned to Sarah's condo, where his family waited in a strange state of suspended animation. They were safe, but not free. Protected, but not home. How long do we have to stay here? Tommy asked for the 100th time. Not much longer, James promised, hoping it was true. Alex posted bail at 9:23 p.m. and returned to his house to find his front windows spiderwebbed with cracks. Not broken, just damaged enough to distort his view of the outside world. James watched through his security app as Alex circled the property with a flashlight, examining the damage, checking for intruders. The man's movements were jerky, paranoid, those of someone who no longer trusted his environment. At 11:45 p.m., Alex's house went dark. Every light, every electronic device, every digital display, all dead. The power company would later blame it on a transformer malfunction, but James knew better. Vincent's crew had cut him off from the grid. For 3 hours, Alex sat in darkness while his phone rang constantly with calls from numbers that didn't exist. When the power finally returned at 2:51 a.m., his house had been transformed. Every piece of furniture had been moved 6 inches to the left. James watched Alex discover this through the night vision function of his cameras. The man went from room to room, measuring distances with shaking hands, trying to understand how someone had entered his locked house and rearranged everything with mathematical precision. By dawn, Alex was sitting on his front porch with a rifle across his knees, watching the street with eyes that no longer blinked. Vincent called at 7 a.m. He's broken, ready to make a deal. What kind of deal? Total capitulation. He leaves town, never contacts your family again, doesn't even look back. Vincent's voice carried satisfaction. He'll be gone by noon. How can you be sure? Because I'm about to make him an offer he'll understand. Sometimes the only language hunters respect is superior violence. James didn't ask for details. Some conversations were better left unheard. At 11:42 a.m., James received a text message from an unknown number. Problem solved. Invoice will be mailed to your work address. Pleasure doing business. Through his security app, he watched Alex load boxes into a rental truck with frantic efficiency. No careful packing, no organized departure, just desperate escape from a situation that had spiraled beyond his control. By 12:15 p.m., the truck was gone. Alex Randall had vanished from their lives as suddenly as he'd appeared, leaving only an empty house and 3 weeks of psychological scars. James called Lily with the news. He's gone. Gone? Where? Does it matter? He's not our problem anymore. That afternoon, James returned to the house on Maple Street, alone. He unlocked the front door, walked into the empty silence, and took a long breath. The same air, the same rooms, but it no longer felt like home. It was a place that had been violated, not just by Alex Randall, but by the lies that festered long before him. He stood in the kitchen, where it had all started. The shattered mug, the pale face, the silence. All of it was still here. That evening, he met Lily and Tommy at Sarah's condo. They sat down in the living room, James with a folder in his hands. Tommy, James said gently, can you give me and Mom a few minutes? Tommy looked unsure, but nodded and left the room. He'd gone over this moment in his head 100 times. Each version ended the same. You can forgive fear. You can even forgive weakness. But lying for months while a hunter circles your home? That was a fracture he couldn't ignore. Love, maybe, but not trust. And without trust, there's no home. James opened the folder and placed a set of documents on the coffee table. It's a divorce agreement, already reviewed by a lawyer. I've signed it. Lily froze. What are you talking about? I'm not taking you back, Lily, he said calmly. This was never just about Alex. He didn't start this. You did. He was the crack in the foundation you left behind. Her lips trembled. I told you the truth. After months of lies, after watching our son get pulled into something dangerous, after you stood there, letting me question my own sanity while you deleted messages and hid parts of the story, you didn't come clean. You got caught. She looked down, silent. You'll have shared custody. Tommy deserves both parents, but not under the same roof. I've already arranged an apartment. It's covered for the next 6 months. After that, it's yours to manage. James, please, she whispered. We can fix this. He looked at her, really looked, and saw a woman he no longer knew. A woman who once shared a life with him, but now sat on the opposite side of a cold war. I don't want to fix it, he said. I want peace. He stood up. You'll tell Tommy whatever you want, just not a lie. Tell him we're separating because adults sometimes make choices that have consequences. And this is one of them. She opened her mouth to speak, but James was already at the door. I'm taking him home. She blinked, stunned. You mean now? Yes, he deserves stability, and so do I. That evening, James pulled into the driveway on Maple Street with Tommy beside him in the passenger seat. The boy was quiet, watching the familiar front door like it was something sacred. Are we back? He asked. James looked at him. You and me, kiddo. We're home. He didn't say we, not the old we. That version of the family was gone. But what remained, this fierce, quiet bond between father and son, that was still alive. And that was enough. 6 weeks later, the house at 247 Maple Street went up for sale. The listing described it as a motivated seller situation with a price reduced for quick closure. James bought it. He didn't tell Lily. She was no longer part of decisions like that. They hadn't lived together since the day he returned to the house with Tommy and left her behind at Sarah's condo. The conversation had been quiet, surgical. You brought him into our lives, he had said, not angry, not shouting, just tired. And you kept him close, long after you knew what he was. She cried, begged, asked if they could try again for Tommy's sake. James only shook his head. Tommy will have a safe home, but not with both of us in it. Not anymore. Now the house truly was his. He paid cash through a loan against his business, transferring ownership via a shell corporation, one of many solutions Vincent had provided. Lily never asked. He suspected she didn't want to know. In the basement, James found what he expected. Surveillance files, labeled folders, printed photos. His life, his son's life, documented, mapped. He burned everything in the backyard fire pit, one box at a time. Flames licking old secrets into ash. On the final day of cleanup, tucked behind the rusted water heater, he found a note. This isn't over. You think you won, but you just made it personal. I'll find new ways to hurt you. Different approaches, patient approaches. You can't watch your family forever. James read it twice, then fed it into the fire. Empty threats from a hollow man. 3 months later, Detective Morrison called. Thought you'd want to know. Alex Randall turned up in Oregon. There was a confrontation with police. He'd been following a woman obsessively. Things escalated. He charged at officers with a tool in hand. James sat with the phone to his ear, unmoving. Then, any family? None that claimed the body. State took care of burial. Thanks, Detective. He ended the call and stepped outside. Tommy was hammering boards together in the backyard, building what he called a battle fort. His hair was wild in the wind, face focused. Lily hadn't called in 2 weeks. When she did, James handed the phone to Tommy, then walked away. That evening, James called Bobby Torino. Jimmy, haven't heard your voice since the storm passed. Just wanted to say it's done. I heard. Oregon, huh? James grunted. Didn't even make the local news. They never do. Bobby was quiet a moment. Then, you good? James looked out the window. The house 3 doors down sat vacant, curtains drawn, yard wild again. Yeah, I am. You ever need help again? I know where to find you, but I hope I never do. He hung up. No ceremony, no reflection, just silence. The next weekend, he opened the safe Vincent's team had installed in the basement, deep inside what had once been Alex's bunker of delusions. The backup drive remained untouched. Names, records, photos, insurance, Vincent had called it. James locked it again, reset the code, just in case. Fall came, then winter. Tommy turned 11. James baked a crooked cake and took him to the batting cages. They laughed like they hadn't in months. At night, Tommy no longer asked if the cameras were still working. He just slept. Spring brought fresh grass and a new roof. Lily sent an email asking to meet. James never replied. He paid her alimony on time. Made sure Tommy called every other weekend. Nothing more. 1 year later, James Carter stood on his back deck and watched his son ride a bike down the street, shouting something to a friend. A good shout. Not fear, not worry. Just boyhood. He sipped his coffee. The war was over. The family wasn't whole, but it was safe. He had not saved his marriage. He had saved his son. And that was enough.